Good evening. Well, tonight is part 3 of BRAT FARRAR. A quick recap. Brat has just come from the lawyer's office where he has presented himself as Patrick Ashby, a presumed suicide at 13, who at 21 would come, and also ownership of the very well thought of stud farm of Latchets. So Brat has posed, and he's reporting in now on his time in the lawyer's office. Whew, all right. No one had followed him into the restaurant, and no one seemed to be taking any interest in him. He paid his bill and went out. No one was following him. No one was loitering anywhere. The pavement was one long stream of hurrying people. He went to a telephone at Victoria. "Well," said Loading, "how did it go?" "Wonderful." "Have you been drinking?" "No, I have ever heard you use a superlative." "I'm just pleased." "My God, you must be. Does it show?" "Show? Is there any faint change in that poker face of yours?" "How should I know? Don't you want to know about this afternoon?" "I already know the most important thing." "What is that?" "You haven't been given in charge." "Did you expect me to be?" "There was always the chance, but I didn't really expect it, not with our combined. Did the old boy fall on your neck?" "No, he nearly fell over. He's being very correct." "Everything to be verified." "Yes." "How did he receive you?" "He took me for Simon." You heard Loading's amused laughter. "Did you manage to use his tournament party?" "Yes." "Oh my God, don't go monosyllabic on me. You didn't have to rake it up, did you?" "No, it fitted very neatly." "Was he impressed?" "It had him on the ropes." "It didn't convince him, though." "I didn't wait to see. I was on my way out." "You mean that was your exit line?" "My boy, I take off my hat to you. You're a perishing marvel. The last fortnight, I thought I was beginning to know you, but you're still surprising me to death." "I surprise myself, if it's any consolation to you." "I don't detect any bitterness in that line, do I?" "No, just surprise." "Neat." "Ah, well, we shall not be meeting for some time to come. It has been a privilege to know you, my boy. I shall never hear Kew Gardens mentioned without thinking fondly of you. And I look forward, of course, to further privileges from knowing you in the future. There's absolutely no alternative. You are as well briefed as I can make you. From now on, you're on your own." Loading was right. It had been a wonderful briefing. For a whole fortnight, from early morning till 7 in the evening, rain or shine, they had sat in Kew Gardens and rehearsed the ways of Latchets and Clare, the histories of Ashbys and Ledinghams, the lie of a land he had never seen. And that too had been exciting. He had always been what they called good at exams, and had always come to an examination paper with the same faint pleasure that an addict brings to a quiz party. And those 14 days in Kew Gardens had been one glorified. Indeed, the last few days has had some of the tightrope excitement that had characterized this afternoon. "Which arm did you bowl with?" "Go to the stables from the side door." "Did you sing?" "Could you play the piano?" "Who lived in the lodge at Clare?" "What color was your mother's hair?" "How did your father make his money apart from the estate?" "What was the name of his firm?" "What was your favorite food?" "The name of the tuck shop owner in the village." "Where is the Ashby pew in the church?" "Go from the great drawing room to the butler's pantry in Clare." "What was the housekeeper's name?" "Could you ride a bicycle?" "What could you see from the south window in the attic?" Loading fired the questions at him through the long days, and it had been at first amusing and stumped. Q had been Loading's idea. Your life since you came to London must be subject to the most searching scrutiny, if you will forgive the cliché. So you can't come and live with me, as I suggested. You can't even be seen with me by anyone we know. Nor can I come to your Pimlico place. You must go on being unvisited there as you have been up till now. So the Kew scheme had been evolved. Kew Gardens, Loden said, had perfect cover and a wonderful field of fire. There was nowhere in London where you could see approaching figures at such a distance and still be unnoticed yourself. Nowhere in London, the undisturbed quiet that Kew did. So each morning they had arrived separately by different gates, had met at a new point and gone to a different region. And there for a fortnight, Loading had primed him with photographs, maps, plans, drawings, and pencil diagrams. He had begun with a 1-inch ordnance survey map of Clare and its surroundings, progressed to a larger size, and thence to plans of the house, so that it was rather like coming down from above in a plane. First the fields and gardens, and then the close-up of the house, so that the thing was whole in his mind from the beginning, and the details had merely to be pointed onto a picture already etched. It was methodical, careful teaching, and Brat appreciated it. But the highlight, of course, was provided by the photographs. And it was not, oddly enough, the photograph of his twin that held his attention once he had seen them all. Simon, of course, was extraordinarily like him, and it gave him a strange, almost embarrassed feeling to look at the pictured face so like his own. But it was not Simon who held his interest. It was the child who had not lived to grow up. The boy, he had an odd feeling of identity with Patrick. Even he himself noticed this and found it strange. He could have been filled, or should have been filled, with guilt when he considered Patrick. But his only emotion was one of partisanship, almost of alliance. Crossing the courtyard of Victoria after telephoning, he wondered what had prompted him to say that about Patrick crying. Loading had told him merely that Patrick had cried, for no known reason. He was 7 then, and had never taken the children out again. Loading had left the story with him to be used as and when he thought fit. What had prompted him to say that Patrick had cried because the horses were so beautiful? Was that, perhaps, why Patrick had cried? Well, there was no going back now, whether he wanted to or not. That insistent voice that had talked to him in the dark of his room had fought for its head and got it. All he could do was sit in the saddle and hope for the best. But at least it would be a breathtaking ride, a unique, heart-dropping ride. Danger to life and limb he was used to, but far more exciting was this new mental danger, this pitting of danger to his immortal soul, the orphanage would call it. But he had never believed in his immortal soul. He couldn't go to Latchett's as a blackmailer. He wouldn't go as a suppliant. He would damn well go as an invader. The telegraph wires swooped and the earth whirled round the carriage window, and Bee's mind swooped and whirled with them. I would have come down to see you, of course, Mr. Sandal had said on the telephone. It is against all my principles to deal with that, but I was afraid that my presence might suggest to the children that there was something serious afoot, and it would be a pity to upset them if there was a chance that the trouble is temporary. Poor dear old Mr. Sandal. He had been very kind, had asked her if she was sitting down before he broke the news and had said, "You're not feeling faint, are you, Miss Ashby?" when his shock had been administered. She had not fainted. She had sat for a long time, letting her knees get back their strength. And then she had gone to her room and looked for photographs of Patrick. Except for a studio group taken on a 9, she seemed to have nothing. She was not a snapshot keeper. Nora had been a passionate collector of her children's photographs, but she had spurned photograph albums, which she held to be a great waste of time and space. Nora had never wasted anything. It had been as if she was half conscious that her allotted time was short. She had kept them all in a tattered and bursting manila envelope with OHMS on it, and the envelope went everywhere with her. It had gone to Europe on that holiday with her, and had made part of that blaze on the Kent coast. Photographs. Bea went up to the old nursery, as if there she might get nearer to the child, Patrick, although she knew very well that nothing of Patrick's remained there. Simon had burned them all. It was the only sign he had given that his twin's death was more than he could well bear. Simon had gone away to school after Patrick's death, and when he came back for the summer holidays, he had behaved normally, if one took it for granted that not mentioning Patrick was in the circumstances normal enough. And then one day, Bea had come on him tending a bonfire where the children had made their red Indian campfires beyond the shrubbery. And on the fire were Patrick's. Even exercise books, she noticed, had been brought down to feed the flames. Books and childish paintings, and the silly horse that had hung at the end of his bed. Simon was burning them all. He had been furious when he saw her. He had moved between her and the fire, standing at bay, as it were, and glared at her. "I don't want them around," he had said, almost shouting. "I understand, Simon," she had said, and had gone away. So there was nothing of Patrick in the old nursery under the eaves, and not very much of the other children, after all. When this had been Bea's own nursery, it had been ugly largely with rejections from the other parts of the house. It had patterned linoleum and a rag rug and a cuckoo clock and crazy basket chairs and a clothes horse and a deal table covered with a red rep tablecloth trimmed with baubles and marked with ink stains, and colored prints of bubbles and other masterpieces hung against a cabbage rose wallpaper. But Nora had a donation from a homemaker magazine. It's powder blue and white with a wallpaper of nursery rhyme characters. Only the cuckoo clock had stayed. The children had been happy there, but had left no mark on it. Now that it was empty and tidy, it looked just like something in a furniture shop window. She'd gone back to her own room, bath bag for her use in the morning. Tomorrow, she must go up to town and face this new emergency in the history of the Ashbys. "Do you believe yourself that it is Patrick?" she had asked. But Mr. Sandal could give her no assurance. "He has not the air of a pretender," he allowed. "And if he is not Patrick, then who is he? The Ashby family resemblance has always been abnormally strong, and there is no other son of this generation." "But Patrick would have written," she said. Patrick would never have left her in grief and doubt all those years. Patrick would have written. It couldn't be Patrick. Then, if it wasn't Patrick, who was it? Round and round went her mind, swooping and whirling. "You will be the best judge," Mr. Sandal had said. "Of those now living, you are the one who knew the boy best." "There is Simon," she had said. But Simon was a boy at the time, and boys forget, don't they? You were grown up. So the onus was she to know. She who had loved Patrick, but now could hardly remember what he looked like at 13. What test would there be? Or would she know at once, when she saw him, that he was Patrick, or that he wasn't? And if he wasn't, and yet insisted that he was, what would happen? Would he bring a claim, make a court action of it, drag them all through the publicity of the daily press? And if he was Patrick, what was Simon? How would he take the resurrection of a brother he had not seen for 8 years, the loss of a fortune? Would he be glad about it, fortune or no, or would he hate his brother? The coming-of-age celebrations would have to be much too close now for anything to be decided by that time. What excuse should they make? But oh, if it could, by some miracle, be Patrick, she would be free of that haunting horror, the thought of the boy who regretted too late to come back. Her mind was still swooping and swirling as she climbed the stairs to the offices of Gossett, Thrigg, and Noble. "Ah, Miss Ashby," Mr. Sandell said, "this is a shocking dilemma, a most unprecedented. Do sit down. You must be exhausted. A dreadful ordeal for you. Sit down. Sit down. Mercer, some tea for Miss Ashby." "Did he say why he didn't write all those years?" she asked. "He said something about perhaps preferring to be dead." "Oh, a psychological difficulty, no doubt," Mr. Sandell said, proffering comfort. "Then you believe it is Patrick? I mean, if it is Patrick, his preferring to be dead would no doubt arise from the same psychological difficulty as did his running away." "Yes, I see. I suppose so. Only it is so unlike Patrick. Not to write, I mean." "It was unlike Patrick to run away." "Yes, there is that. He certainly wasn't a runner away by nature. He was a sensitive child, but very brave." She sat silent for a moment. "And now he is back." We hope so. "Did he seem quite normal to you?" "Excessively," said Mr. Sandell, with a hint of dryness in his tone. "I looked for photographs of Patrick, but there is nothing later than this." She produced the studio group. The children had studio portraits taken regularly every 3 years from the time they were babies. This was the last of them. The new one would have been taken in the summer of the year that Bill and Nora were killed, the year Patrick disappeared. Patrick is 10 there. She watched while Mr. Sandell studied the small. "No," he said at last. "It is impossible to say anything from so early a photograph. As I said before, the family likeness is very strong. At that age, they are just young Ashbys, aren't they? Without any great individuality." He looked up from studying the photograph and went on, "I am hoping that when you yourself see the boy, the young man, you will have no doubt one way or another. After all, it is not entirely a matter of likeness, this recognition, is it? There is an aura of personality." "Sure. What is to happen if I am not sure?" "About that, I think I have found a way out. I dined last night with my young friend Kevin McDermott." "The KC?" "Yes. I was greatly distressed, of course, and told him of my difficulty, and he comforted me greatly by assuring me that identification would be a quite simple matter. It is merely an affair of teeth." "Teeth? But Patrick had quite ordinary teeth." Yes, but he had no doubt been to a dentist, and dentists have records. Indeed, most dentists have a sort of visual memory, I understand, a very grim thought, and would certainly recognize one at sight. But the record will certainly show. He caught the look on Bee's face and paused. What is the matter? The children went to Hammond. Hammond? Well, that is simple, isn't it? If you don't definitely identify the boy as Patrick, we have only to... He broke off. Hammond, he said quietly. Oh, yes, Bee said, agreeing with the tone of the monosyllable. How very unfortunate. Into the subsequent silence, Mr. Sandow said miserably, I think I ought to tell you that Kevin McDermott thinks the boy is lying. What could Mr. McDermott possibly know about it? Said Bee angrily. He has not even seen him. And as Mrs. Sandow went on sitting in miserable silence, well, it was only Kevin's opinion on the hypothesis. I know, but why did he think that? He said it was a phony thing to come straight to a lawyer. Possible thing to do. Yes, that was his point. It was too sensible, too pat. Everything Kevin said was too pat for his liking. He said a boy coming home after years away would go home. Then he doesn't know Patrick. That is just what Patrick would have done, broken it gently by going to the family lawyer first. He was always the most thoughtful and unselfish of creatures. I don't think much of the clever Mr. McDermott's analysis. I felt it only right to tell you everything, Mr. Sandow. Yes, of course, Bee said kindly, recovering her temper. Did you tell Mr. McDermott that the boy had remembered crying at Olympia? I mean that he had volunteered the information? I did, yes. And he still thought the boy was lying? That was part of the patness he professed not to like. Bee gave a small snort. What a mind, she said. I suppose that it is a detached mind, that is all. One not emotionally engaged in the matter as we are. It behooves us to keep our minds detached. Yes, of course, Bee said, sobered. Well, now that poor old Hammond is to be no help to us. They never found him, did you know? Everything was just blown to dust. Yes, so I heard. Poor fellow. Now that we have no physical evidence, I suppose we have to rely on the boy's own story. I suppose that can be done. Oh, quite easily. It is all quite straightforward with dates and places. That is what Kevin found so... Yes. Of course it can be checked. And of course I'm sure that it will check. He would not have offered us information which would be proved nonsense. So really there's nothing to wait for. No. Then how soon can you arrange for me to meet him? Well, I have been thinking about it, and I don't think you know that it should be arranged at all. What? What I should like to do, with your permission and cooperation, would be to, as it were, walk in on him. Go and see him unannounced, so that you would see him as he is, and not as he wants you to see him. If we made an appointment here at the office, he would... Yes, I see. I understand. I agree to that. Can we go now? I really don't see why not, Mr. Sandow said in that regretful tone that lawyers use when they cannot see any reason why not. There is, of course, the chance that he may be out, but we can at least go and see. Ah, here is your tea. Will you drink it while Mercer asks Simpson to ask Willett to get us a taxi? You haven't got anything stronger, have you? Bee asked. I'm afraid not. Come to the transatlantic custom of the bottle in the office. But Willett will get you anything you may. Oh, no, thank you, it's all right. I'll drink the tea. They say the effects are much more lasting anyway. Mr. Sandow looked as though he would like to pat her encouragingly on the shoulder, but could not make up his mind to it. He was really a very kind little man, she thought, but just not much of a prop. Did he explain why he chose the name Farrah? She asked when they were seated in the taxi. He didn't explain anything, Mr. Sandow said, falling back on his dry. I thought that he was badly off. He did not mention money, but he seemed very well dressed in a slightly un-English fashion. There was no suggestion of a loan. Oh, no. Oh, dear me, no. Then he hasn't come back just because he is broke, Bea said, and felt somehow pleased. She sat back and relaxed a little. Perhaps everything was going to be all right. I have never quite understood why Pimlico descended so rapidly, breaking the silence as they traveled down the avenue of pretentious porches. It has fine, wide streets and little through traffic, and no more smuts than its neighbors. Why should the well-to-do have deserted it and yet stayed in Belgravia? Very puzzling. There was a sort of suction about desertion, Bea said, trying to meet him on the small talk level. The local Lady Almighty occasions the draft by leaving, and the rest, in descending order of importance, follow in her wake. And the poorer people flood in from either side to fill the vacuum. Is this the place? Her dismay took possession of her again as she looked at the dismal front of the house, at the peeling paint and the stained stucco, the unswept doorway, and the rubbed-out house number on the horrible pillar. The front door was open, and they walked in. A different card on each door in the hallway proclaimed the fact that the house was let out in single rooms. The address is 59K, Mr. Sandow said. I take it that K is the number of the room. They begin on the ground floor and work upwards on my side. So they mounted. H, said Bea, peering at a first-floor door. It's up the next flight. The second floor was off the top one. They stood together on the dark landing, listening to the silence. He is out, she thought. He is out, and I shall have to go through all this again. Have you a match? She said. I and J, she read on the two front room doors. Then it was the back one. They stood in the dark for a moment, staring at it. Then Mr. Sandow moved purposely forward and knocked. It was a deep boy's voice, quite unlike Simon's light, sophisticated tones. Bea, being half a head taller than Mr. Sandow, could see over his shoulder, and her first feeling was one of shock, that he should be so much more like Simon than Patrick ever was. Her mind had been filled with images of Patrick, vague, blurred images that she strove to make clear so that she could compare them with the adult reality. Her whole being had been obsessed with Patrick for the last 24 hours. And now, here was someone just like Simon. The boy got up from where he was, no haste or embarrassment, pulled from off his left hand the sock he had been darning. She couldn't imagine Simon darning a sock. Good morning, he said. Good morning, said Mr. Sandow. I hope you don't mind. I brought you a visitor. He moved aside to let Bea come in. Do you know who this is? Bea's heart hammered on her ribs as she met the boy's light, calm gaze and watched him identify her. You do your hair differently, he said. Yes, of course. Hairdressing had changed completely in those 8 years. Of course he would see a difference. You recognize her then, Mr. Sands? It's Aunt Bea. She waited for him to come forward to greet her, but he made no move to. After a moment's pause, he turned to find a seat for her. "I'm afraid there is only one chair. It is all right if you don't lean back on it," he said, picking up one of those hard chairs with a black curved back and a tan seat with small holes in it. Bea was glad to sit down on it. "Do you mind the bed?" he said to Mr. Sandow. "I'll stand, thank you, I'll stand," Mr. Sandow said hastily. The details, she thought, watching the boy stick the needle carefully in the sock. It was the general impression that was the same. Once you really looked at him, the startling resemblance vanished, and only the family likeness remained. "Miss Ashby could not wait for a meeting at my office, so I brought her here," Mr. Sandow said. "You don't seem particularly—" He allowed the sentence. The boy looked at her in a friendly, unsmiling way and said, "I'm not very sure of my welcome." It was a curiously immobile face. A face like a child's drawing, now she came to think of it. Everything in the right place and with the right proportions, but without animation. Even the mouth had the straight, uncompromising line that is a child's version of a mouth. He moved over to lay the socks on the dressing table. "Have you hurt your leg?" she asked. "I broke it, over in the States. But should you be walking about on it if it is still tender?" "Oh, it doesn't hurt," he said. "It's just short." "Short? You mean permanently short?" "It looks like it." They were sensitive lips, she noticed. For all their thinness, they gave him away when he said that. "But something can be done about that," she said. "It just means that it was mended badly. I expect you didn't have a very good surgeon." "I don't remember a surgeon. Perhaps I passed out. They did all the correct things, hung weights on the end of it and all that. But Pat," she began, and failed to finish his name. "You don't have to call me anything until you are sure." "They do miracles in surgery nowadays," she said, covering her break. "How long ago is it since it happened?" "Oh, I'd have to think. About a couple of years now, I think." Except for the flat American A, his speech was without peculiarity. "Well, we must see what can be done about it." "A horse, was it?" "Yes. I wasn't quick enough." "How did you know it was a horse?" "You told Mr. Sandow that you had worked with horses. Did you enjoy that?" Just like railway carriage small talk, she thought. It's the only life I do enjoy. She forgot about small talk. "Really," she says, "those Western ones?" Most of them were commoners, of course. Very good stuff for their work, which, after all, is being a good horse, I suppose. But every now and then you come across one with blood. Some of those are beauties. More individual than I ever remember English horses being. Perhaps in England we manner the individuality out of them. I hadn't thought of it. Did you have a horse of your own at all?" "Yes, I had one. Smoky." She noticed the change in his voice when he said it, as audible as the flat note in the cracked bell of a chime. "A gray?" "Yes, a dark gray with black points. Not that hard iron color, you know. A soft, smoky color. When he had a tantrum..." A whirling cloud of smoke. She could see it. He must love horses to be able to see them like that. He must particularly have loved his Smoky. "What happened to Smoky?" "I sold him." No trespassers. Very well, she would not trespass. He had probably had to sell the horse when he broke his leg. She began to hope very strenuously that this was Patrick. The thought recalled her to the situation which she had begun to lose sight of. She looked doubtfully at Mr. Sandal. Catching the appeal in her glance, Mr. Sandal said, "Miss Ashby is no doubt prepared to vouch for you, but you will understand that the matter needs more clarification. If it were a simple matter of a prodigal's homecoming, your aunt's acceptance of you would no doubt be sufficient. But in the present instance, it is a matter of property, of the ultimate destination of a fortune, and the law will require incontrovertible evidence of your identity before you could be allowed to succeed to anything that was Patrick Ashby's. I hope you understand our position." "I understand perfectly. I shall, of course, stay here until you have made your inquiries and are satisfied." "But you can't stay here," Bee said, looking with loathing at the room and the forest of chimney pots beyond the window. "I have stayed in a great many worse places." "Perhaps, but that is no reason for staying here. If you need money, we can give you some, you know." "I'll stay here, thanks." "Are you just being intense quiet here, and handy, and bung full of privacy? When you have lived in bunkhouses, you put a high value on privacy." "Very well, you stay here. Is there anything else we can stake you to?" "I could do with another suit." "Very well. Mr. Sandal will advance whatever you need for that." She suddenly remembered that if he went to the Ashby tailor, there would be a sensation. So she added, "And he will give you the address of his tailor." "Why not Walter's?" said the boy. "Aren't they there anymore?" "Oh, yes, but there would be too many explanations if you went to Walter's." She must keep a hold on herself. Anyone could find out who the Ashby tailor had been. "Oh, yes, I see." She fell back on small talk and began to take her leave. "We have not told the family about you," she said, as she prepared to go. "We thought it better not to until things are what Mr. Sandal calls clarified." A flash of amusement showed in his eyes at that, and a secret laughter. "I understand." She turned at the door to say goodbye. He was standing in the middle of the room, watching her go, leaving Mr. Sandal to shepherd her out. He looked remote and lonely, and she thought, if this is Patrick come home again, and I am leaving him like this, as if he were a casual acquaintance. It was more than she could bear, the thought of the boy's loneliness. She went back to him, took his face lightly in her gloved hand, and kissed his cheek. "Welcome back, my dear," she said. And that is part 3 of Brat Farrar. On what, I don't know if this has been interrupted a lot. I keep getting that message, and I don't know what to do about it, but anyway, I hope this has gone smoothly, and I hope you will join me again next week at 6 for Tales and Cocktails and part 4 of Brat Farrar. I keep looking this way and you're this way. Take care, my dears. See you next week. Bye now.